And thank you very much to everyone here in the room. We're going to move on to our next session now. And I'm pleased to be staying on to moderate this session, this Q&A, with the European Commission Executive Vice President, Teresa Ribera. I'm delighted to welcome the Commission's Vice President to the stage. I think everyone will agree, extremely relevant to the discussions we've been having this afternoon and this morning about the whole issue of competitiveness and the transatlantic relationship. So, Commissioner Ribera. Hi there. Happy to see you. So, Commission Executive Vice President Ribera, thanks very much for joining us. So maybe we could just start off by quite generally setting out, we're almost a year into this European Commission. You were appointed in this central role, looking after portfolios from the green transition, economic competitiveness, and of course, the issue of antitrust. What would you characterize as the main priorities for you over the last year, and what work remains to be done in that?
First of all, thanks a lot for inviting me, and thanks for the question. I think that it is so important to have a chance to discuss, exchange updates on the transatlantic relations, how we can work together, how we can improve what we do, how we can learn from each other, because I think that there's much that can be learned between Europe and the United States. And I guess that part of your question relates back to this idea, what we can learn from each other to improve what we provide as society in terms of building a better future. And this year has been particularly turbulent, so to learn from each other. I could say that this year it has been a critical year, so to build resilience, remain united, ensure that we are forward-looking in terms of how we can be more secure, more competitive, sticking to our values, building new partnerships, thinking that the world is increasingly multipolar, so we may relate to many different players, and that, of course, we want to keep a very good relation with the United States, and it has not been particularly easy in this last year, but I think that it is more or less the spirit that has been floating around, how we can keep, improve, remain united, stay forward-looking, use sustainability and values as part of those market forces, market drivers that can help us to create wealth and to be a much more resilient and modern economy.
I mean, you're talking about the difficulties, really, and it's been a difficult time, I think it's fair to say, for transatlantic relationship. And you talk about building new partnerships. I mean, has this been a wake-up call for Europe, the change in rhetoric, the change in administration in the United States, and what kind of new partnerships are you talking about there?
Well, I think that for the most how to say, for most people in the world, counting on a multilateral system that works, delivers based on the rule of law, predictability, stability, is an important thing. And that has been, I could say, the bad part of this relationship. We always took the United States as that real partner, that was a key partner to build global governance, to ensure technological improvements, to ensure well-functioning trade. It's true that we have also learned that we need to develop and count on our own capacities to ensure security, and we may be reliant too much on the United States. But it has been a kind of a shock. We need to speak to the rest of the world, and we need to develop other partnerships. And that's not against anyone, but on the contrary, it could be more than better that we can count on the United States in that effort. I think that that is something that is quite key, and as it is popularly said, whenever you leave the ground, there is someone else. occupying that ground. So I think that the ground, the small, big world needs to count on these committed societies, these societies committed to values and to the respect of the liberal order, and to improve, to invest in a better future, as I said. And that's the thing that we could like to keep on doing with the United States too. And that's where we have mainly heard not so much positive in this recent year.
Yes, I mean, that idea of shared values and the liberal order you mentioned, which was a central feature of comparison between the United States and Europe. What about China? It's one of the debates that's been happening here throughout the day. I mean, where does Europe position itself now vis-a-vis China? We were hearing in the last panel about like their need and their commitment to advancing, say, in AI. They're increasing their chip production, that kind of thing. I mean, how does Europe respond to a country like China, which does not share the values, really, of the European Union in so many ways?
Yes, it's true. There are many things that we do not share with China. There are some things that we share. We are continents that do not count on fossil fuels, that think that we need to make access to energy in a much more sound and clean manner and in a more efficient manner. And there are things where we do not agree. I think that there is much room for improvement in terms of how we can build democracy, how we can build respect to freedom and liberties. And there are things where we identify that there are technological challenges being responded differently and even positioning its country differently. So to what extent we can ensure that the trade relations are fair, the technology breakthroughs can respect intellectual property rights or can be developed jointly, to what extent we stay aware and prevent any type of additional development in terms of regional threats, are things that will be part of the landscape of the global agenda for the time to come. And China is a big country with high-speed development in terms of technology breakthroughs and positioning its economy in a very impressive manner. And yes, the digital, the protection of the data are things that we need to take into consideration, while in other fields I think that it is quite obvious that they have been providing solutions that could help to the whole humankind to count on sound solutions for access to clean energy or clean mobility that could make a difference. So it is also our task to be able to keep on providing these solutions, taking into consideration that we have the business capacity, the labor capacity, the investment capacity to do much better.
So those possibilities in clean energy, clean mobility that you mentioned for China, is that something you see emerging because the US is going a very different direction when it comes to these kind of areas?
Well, that was a reality before, but I think that the fact that the United States seems to be backtracking is not helpful for these technology breakthroughs that still need to happen. I'm sure that there is still quite a big amount of investments taking place in what we could call the green economy, also in the United States, including the development of new patents, of new solutions, and the American society is great on that. The American society counts on great technology researchers in the capacity, counts on the capacity to grow up from the very startup size towards large-scale solutions. And I think it could be fantastic to keep on working in this technology side with the American investors, with the American industrials, even if apparently it is not the priority for the White House in these days.
So where do you see that possibility of those kind of green tech and innovative, like harnessing, I suppose, American innovation, American scale-ups for these kind of projects? Where do you see that coming from? Not at a federal level? Is it just the private sector, state level?
That's true. Last week I was in New York and I had the opportunity to meet some governors and some members of the House and some mayors. And I heard about this initiative speaking on the possibility of America being still in this clean tech race. So the federal regulation, the federal support may be one thing, but at the very same time, there are lots of initiatives taking place and lots of regulation at the state level that can support the modernization of the grids, the installation of new capacity, power capacity, clean power capacity that could be helping into this digital and AI revolution that is already taking place and that requires energy, water, and soil. So there may be lots of new things happening at smaller scale, but that sum up quite a big amount of modernization of the American economy.
Another area, I suppose, of tension between Washington and Brussels for some time has been the issue of digital regulation. And of course, you have central involvement here. We just recently announced the fine on Google, for example. Are you worried that the EU's regulatory tools and the EU's regulatory oversight is going to be very damaging to EU-US relations?
Honestly, no. I mean, I think that something that we need to bear in mind is that in the Declaration of Independence of the United States, you spoke about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The democratic values being so important, the origins of the competition and antitrust regulation to defend industrials against the market share, the big market share of someone's getting monopolies or oligopolies, protecting consumers, protecting industrials, protecting the business community, protecting democracy. And it is absolutely true that now we cannot understand the economy, we cannot even understand the industry or the services without the digital reality. But there are not so many. And they have been accumulating at a fast-growing speed, such a big power. We are so much, the whole world, dependent on so few players. And that fits into the system in such a dangerous way that, of course, both the antitrust American authorities and European authorities realize that it is time to regulate a bit better, so to ensure that new players can challenge the traditional incumbents, so that there are not abuse of dominance by anyone in a given position. And the American antitrust authorities play with certain rules, and we Europeans play with our own rules. And we talk to each other, and we respect each other, and we intend to get the same goal, which is to ensure that things work well, that the level playing field is respected, that innovation is not being killed, and that consumers are protected. I think that around 75% of the new players being benefited by the European regulation come from the United States. So it's also the American business who is asking the European Competition Authority to work in the European digital markets to prevent this abuse of dominance and to ensure that they can grow up and boost new opportunities, and that it is through competition that the best can get a bigger share, but not because of this protection of this bigger share, innovation may be killed.
I mean, one of the topics we were discussing in the last panel was the AI, development, the race to be at the top of AI. I mean, is the Commission how concerned are you about this new front in technological advancement with the proliferation of data centers, for example, like what that means for energy? That seems to be cutting across some of the EU's green credentials. The idea, the reality being that these AI companies, AI data centers, their implications for energy use are enormous. Are you concerned? Because it has caught the eye. Some of the AI partnerships like Microsoft, OpenAI has caught the eye of the European Commission. What's your view on this whole new expanding area of the technological revolution?
Well, I think that this is a fascinating new world, and I think that, of course, it comes with lots of new challenges, big challenges, I could say. Yes, it is quite intense in energy consumption. Some solutions or some players are trying to be as efficient as possible in terms of energy consumption, water to cool the data centers and the infrastructure. But it is also something that relates back to the access to the data, sensitive data in some cases. So the accumulation of data or the prevention to access to the data to feed into the algorithms and the learning process may create new distortions in the market, and that is an issue that we need to tackle. Some of them, as I said, could turn back to personal data, so there are issues also that could deal with civil rights. So how we can build, what I could say, the governance capacity to ensure that this works in such a manner that does not create additional distortions, not to speak about the microchips and the magnets that we need in order to put in place the new digital AI economy. So it is software, hardware, other services and goods being related, and other liberties and rights that deserve protection. Yes, we need to work on that. There are particular initiatives. There is a set of initiatives that the Commission is trying to figure and to promote, having this broad understanding, this comprehensive approach to be sure that it grows up in an adequate manner. To end with a final comment that I consider quite interesting. Last week, I don't know if you were aware, but in New York, in the context of the UN General Assembly opening session and conferences, there was this launch of UN governance of AI initiative. So to see to what extent different countries, different parties to the United Nations can work together in the development of a common set of rules to ensure that it works smoothly.
Because even I think I'm right in saying that Mario Draghi quite recently criticized the AI rules, saying maybe they'd gone too far. I mean, is that a valid criticism? The EU's AI Act, that it's too, that it needs to change in a way?
Well, there are these developments of the AI rules that need to be promoted and quick. And there are tensions which are obvious. I mean, there are the publishers, press, and even the creators that say, hey, this may drive us into the desperation, the big theft of our data and intellectual creativity, being reflected in a kind of summary, anonymous summary, that will be killing the possibility to count on the access to any kind of remuneration or recognition to the original creation of any intellectual outcome, and that could be feeding into the wrong direction, because that could go on its own, and then how we can ensure that what it has been quite a relevant engine for improvement for the societies may not count on the adequate platform. So that is not to mean that we need to block, or we need to freeze, or we need to give a blank check to accept whatever. This is very honestly new challenges that we need to respond in a very wise manner. Quick, that's for sure, but wise too.
But sometimes the EU is not known for speed on some of these things.
Well, but we are reliable, stable, predictable, things that others may be missing.
I mean, your broader portfolio, if you like, one of the major challenges facing the EU and Europe is, of course, the competitiveness challenge. And I mentioned Mario Draghi's comments about the AI Act, but he was here in Brussels a couple of weeks ago to mark the anniversary of his report. And of course, all the media, including myself and everyone, were making the point, like, how many of his suggestions in his landmark report had actually been adopted. I mean, what should, or what do you think will be the main focus, say, over the next 6 months, that the EU needs to advance in order to ensure that it remains competitive, that it remains a place for businesses to innovate, and it doesn't lose any more of these market shares or any more of the unicorns leaving for the US we heard there earlier? I mean, what should it actually, what are you going to focus on to make sure that the competitiveness issue is addressed?
So may I say something just to start? It's my 20 seconds of publicity. I think that sometimes we procrastinate a lot. I think that we are a fantastic economy, a fantastic and competitive continent, and we have strengths that probably nobody else in the world, including the United States, have. So just to say, because sometimes we get into the mood side, and the blue side, and we don't get all these other elements that are bright elements to keep on building. And we need to build on those bright sides.
And what are the bright sides?
For instance, we need to come up with a real breakthrough in terms of the development of the single market. That's one of the big lessons from this very last year. Remain united and keep on driving the single market. And that may be related to the interconnections and the energy system, to the infrastructures, as Enrico Letta was saying, to the possibility to simplify the way we handle with the administrations in the 27 member states, to count on a much more united version of capital markets or savings and investments union, as we, by the way, adopted this morning.
Just today,
yesterday.
There was an announcement on that,
Yes. So the main thing is that, yes, of course, we need to do all those things at the very same time, and I think that that is part of what it is, the clear mandate for this period in the Commission. In the coming months, we need to come up with some of the most relevant aspects. We did this clean industrial deal diagnostic that Mario Draghi applauded a lot, by the way, but we still need to keep on getting into the concrete deliveries in terms of energy, in terms of skills, in terms of modernizing our competitiveness tools, competition tools, in terms of being consistent on how we use our external policies, including trade, with our domestic policies, in terms of facilitating a much more efficient use of the resources, so the clean being one of the most relevant elements to bet on competitiveness. And yes, there's a set of measures and packages to come up in this very last trimester of the year, dealing with all these fields. By the way, some of them being announced by the President in the State of the Union speech. So
just a few weeks ago.
Yes, just a few. She said something that was very interesting because it is a neologism, homegrown energy. So counting on clean energy and interconnections, counting on the 28th regime to ensure that we can speed up our decisions in terms of permitting and in terms of functioning, operating in the single market, counting on the possibility to develop this use of our savings, being the continent that saves the most, to be dedicated to the investments in our own continent. I think that there are lots of things.
Which is what was proposed today in the Savings and Investment Union package announced by the Commission. But just on that, you're talking about clean tech. Is there not a kind of a broader issue, though? We've got a lot of pushback against, I know particularly in your previous position, you're extremely well known in the field of climate in particular. But we've seen at the moment Germany, for example, is pushing back against these combustion engine rules phase out. I mean, does that worry you in terms of, the Europeans always saw themselves as this leader on climate change. It was always at the forefront, and now it's kind of squabbling over the latest climate targets. Are you very concerned about that, given your experience in this field?
That's a good journalist, provoking a bit. No, I don't feel that is my past, that is my present. Okay. I honestly think it is also my present. I think it is the present of all the Europeans and the largest majority of the people all over the world. That's for sure. Everybody is trying to find the ways to do much better in a much more efficient manner, in a much more cleaner manner. And as I said, it's a market driver with full clarity. No, I think that of course, there may be contradictions in concrete files, and of course, there may be additional difficulties when we enter into a new phase. The low-hanging fruit was reasonably obvious and easy. Then we enter into a much more mainstream approach on the green development, the green economy, the efficient use of resources within the economy. And in order to get this broader mainstream approach, we need to tackle different policies, including social policies, innovation policies. It relates back not only to this aspect of the value chain to get a different engine, but the steel that seems to be also going through different moments, difficult moments, because of the overcapacity of production of steel elsewhere. So I think that, of course, it is not easy, and of course there may be additional distractions around us. We have these terrible scenarios in the eastern border of Europe. We have these difficulties because our traditional partner decides that he wants to play differently, so that doesn't help either. But of course, the commitment is there, the deep conviction that this is the only way to become competitive and to keep on creating wealth, so to ensure that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness can happen at the European way is absolutely clear. The course, very honestly, once the investments have been taking place, to count on electric or electrified vehicles, and the market has understood that this makes sense and that this prevents imports and that this allows to keep into the creation and the innovation in the industrial context, I don't see the point to stop the clock and backtrack.
So
and
you
that
see it
is the
as
risk.
key to the
That
European
is the risk,
success.
to backtrack. I think that rolling back from what we have already achieved
In clean
would be a
tech
great
and
mistake.
energy.
In general terms, yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for that thought, quite a positive thought about what you see as the driver of European competitiveness. I think it's fair to say that is different to some of the views we've heard from the US side today, but it's a very strong, positive statement from the EU about how they see the future of European industry and competitiveness. So, Commission Executive Vice President Teresa Ribera, thank you very much for joining us.
My great pleasure. Thank you.